What's going on there, YouTube, and welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are basically going to jump back into our coverage over the X-Men comics, and of course we pick up with Reign of X, which is the second era of X-Men comics to come after Dawn of X. Now, of course, we kicked off Reign of X with Sword #1, but of course we have to pick up with the main flagship book of the X-Men books, which is X-Men, and we pick up with X-Men number 15. Now, of course, with this book right here, it's kind of Jonathan Hickman telling us what could possibly be next after X of Swords. And that is what we're going to see in the next few books we do in our next few X-Men videos, because now it's kind of like, okay, what's next for those characters or these characters? And X-Men, of course, is kind of starting up the idea to learn what is next for certain characters to come down the road. And so here we are, X-Men number 15, written by Jonathan Hickman himself to get us ready for the Reign of X. And so getting into this video or this storyline, we actually do pick up with Cable, Cyclops, and of course Rachel Summers. Now remember, Cable and Rachel Summers are basically the kids of Cyclops, but both are from alternate timelines, which is kind of confusing. Well, Cable is not. He's kind of from the same timeline, but thanks to time traveling, he's basically older. But Rachel Summers is from an alternate timeline. But either way, though, this is Jonathan Hickman reminding us about the idea of Arrako and COPPA. Because remember, there are two living islands that were connected as one. Of course, the island then was called Okara. But either way, the island was split in half into COPPA and Arrako. But Arrako had disappeared into an entirely different dimension alongside with the children and wife of Apocalypse as a way to keep the creatures of Armeth at bay. And of course, all that took place in Dawn of X and X of Swords. Now, with all that being said, though, now with X of Swords being over, Arrako was able to come back over to Earth to, of course, be reconnected to COPPA. Now, in the earlier books of Jonathan Hickman, we had a small piece of Arrako actually arrive, but now we're having the entire island being able to connect to COPPA, which is actually huge. And so this is the big moment, because thanks to the external gate, which is basically a gate that leads into Otherworld, Arrako now has the ability to just come back over to Earth and reconnect over with COPPA. And so that is the moment you have Arrako appear. And when it does, Arrako is huge. It's like 5 times bigger than COPPA. But either way, though, this is going to be a very huge moment, because now you can think of the idea of Arrako and COPPA coming together as one, and the possibility of having more land for the mutant race to grow on. But of course, when it comes time for Arrako and COPPA to connect to one another, they don't. And that is huge, because remember, these two islands were connected as one, but now you would think with them both being back on Earth, they would try their best to reconnect. But for some strange reason, they're not doing that. And you have Cable say, I don't think they have the same feelings for one another anymore. Like, they used to be in love with each other, but now the two living islands are no longer in love anymore. And so they're not going to connect with one another. But that is when we actually pick up with Cypher. Now remember, Cypher has the mutant ability to basically understand almost any language across the universe. Meaning that if they talk to him, no matter where they're from, he'll be able to actually understand what they're saying. Now that right there is actually very important, because you have COPPA actually come over to Cypher. Because with the two living islands, they speak a different language that most people cannot understand. And so Cypher is being used as a way to communicate with Krakoa. And so you have Krakoa coming over to Cypher, asking Cypher to kind of come with him as Arrako and Krakoa go talk in the middle of the ocean, because both islands kind of had created a human version of themselves as a way to go talk in the middle of the ocean to figure out what is their problem. And of course, Krakoa asked Cypher to come along to kind of be support, to figure out what is the problem between these two nations. And so you actually do have Cypher go back to the Quiet Council. Now remember, the Quiet Council is basically a group of mutants who make the big time decisions for the entire island. Now, of course, the reason why Cypher is there is to tell the Quiet Council the connection or the reconnection of Arrako and Krakoa is not going to happen at all. And the reason why? Because both islands had basically kind of fell out of love with one another. They don't love each other like they used to thousands and thousands of years ago, because both islands have been broken apart for so long. And so with all that being said, you kind of have the Quiet Council wondering what could possibly help us to have those two islands reconnect. Now, you do have Cypher bring up a new group of mutants that we actually already saw back in the tail end of Dawn of X, but also X of Swords, the mutants of Arrako. Because remember, when the two islands did split up and when Arrako went into that other dimension, which was Armeth, of course, you have mutants living on Arrako as well. And so, of course, now with Arrako being back on Earth right next to Krakoa, of course, all those mutants that had lived on Arrako are now back on Arrako on Earth. And here's the thing though, the reason why the Quiet Council is so worried, because now you're talking about two islands, two mutant islands that are right now not possibly going to work together. And that's a problem, because you want to be a race, a united race against the different forces that are trying to wipe out the mutant race. And so if you want to protect yourselves, you have to make sure that all different groups of mutants can actually work together. And so you have Cypher saying Arrako did fall out of love with Krakoa, but on top of that as well, the mutants could possibly be a problem, because there's 20 times more mutants on Arrako than there are on Krakoa. And so you actually do have Charles Xavier and Magneto go over to Arrako, where of course they do meet up with Iska the Unbeaten. And honestly, I like this character. Like, her design and her mutant ability makes things so much more interesting for the X-Men. But either way though, when it comes to Iska the Unbeaten, you do have her tell Charles Xavier and Magneto about the government on Arrako. And what I mean is that when it comes to Krakoa, you have the Quiet Council. That's kind of like the government on Krakoa. They make all decisions for the island. But when it comes to Arrako, they had their own government, which is called the Great Ring of Arrako. Now, the reason why you have Charles Xavier and Magneto here is because, again, they want to make sure that both mutant groups can actually work together. That is the end goal, to make sure that both groups can come together and be as one. Now, of course, you do have Iska the Unbeaten kind of mention that, like, hey, listen, we have been a government of our own for eons. You guys are brand new to this. You're brand new. You're basically children trying to run a government. That is huge. And so with that being said, you're still learning how things should be. You're still learning how your country should be. Listen, I'll take your offer to the other members of the Great Ring as a way to think about, can we actually bring our two nations together as one? But I'm going to tell you, you need to get better as a nation. You need to grow. You need to be stronger and better. And so with that being said, you have Iska the Unbeaten walk away. But of course, the reason why she's walking away is because she feels like Charles Xavier and Magneto don't fully understand what a government system should be like. And so is her saying, learn, keep learning, get better, get stronger. But don't worry, we can figure out a way to bring our two nations together. Now, to go ahead and kind of wrap up today's video, we actually do pick up with Charles Xavier meeting up with Cyclops and Jean Grey. Now, there's something I do want to mention. When it comes to the Quiet Council, you have like, I want to say 10 seats. Now, Jean Grey was actually on one of those seats. But of course, now with her kind of stepping down back in X of Swords, it is Charles Xavier offering Jean Grey to rejoin the Quiet Council. On top of that, he wants Cyclops to also join the Quiet Council. The thing is though, you have both characters actually tell Charles Xavier and Magneto no. And the reason why, because the Cyclops, he feels like him and Jean Grey should be leading the main X-Men team, because this nation needs to know that there is a team out there trying to protect them. There is a team out there that is trying to make sure the world does not end on their land. And so with that being said, is Cyclops and Jean Grey saying, no, we're not going to rejoin the Quiet Council. Instead, we are going to lead a new X-Men team. And that right there is actually pretty cool and pretty important. But with that all being said, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. Also, if you have any suggestions on books I should read, well, please let me know in the comments below, because you never know, your suggestion could be a future video down the road. But guys, I'll see y'all next time. Later.